Good morning, everyone. Welcome to a webinar today on building better forms, looking at hypotheses that we have tested. A bit of housekeeping to begin with. I'm not sure how well everyone can see the screen actually while this is on, but let me just pull a few people to the side. Hopefully that's a little bit clearer for you now. So a bit of housekeeping today. Today's webinar is on forms, so for people who are interested, kind of found across most verticals, I think. So kind of fairly good broad advice that you should be hearing from us today. We have assembled what I like to think of as a superhero panel of highly skilled, very lovely people. So maybe everyone can just introduce themselves, actually, save me speaking on your behalf. But if we start with Chris.
Yes, hi guys. I'm Chief Experience Officer at Creative CX. We're an experimentation consultancy, doing all that great and fun optimization stuff, but we also specialize in UX research and in particular and server-side A/B testing, just so we can test in the whole of the customer journey. So that's me.
Oh, thanks, Chris. And Alan, see you're unmuted.
So I'm unmuted, yeah. So I'm Alan, I'm Managing Director of Zuko Analytics. We're a software platform which is installed on companies' forms to tell them sort of where the issues are on the forms so they can fix them. So over the years, we've seen thousands of forms come through our platform and helped optimize lots of those. So as you might imagine, we've seen a lot of form issues. So hopefully we're able to bring that to bear today.
Excellent. And Emma as well.
Hey guys, I'm Emma. I'm Research Director at Speero. Speero is the sort of agency arm of CXL. We are an experimentation agency specializing in experimentation, but also kind of user research, analytics and design services as well. I've got a background in primarily user research and a real passion for ultimately watching people struggle to complete forms. And I've seen that many times. So I hope to bring some of that experience to the table today.
Awesome. Thank you all. And I'm Sandeep. I run the product team at Webtrends Optimise. For those of you who haven't heard of us, we're an experimentation platform. So kind of being able to run A/B tests and personalize through us, amongst various other things. I get to do the fun stuff, though, which is look at what the product does and why and what it should be doing and stuff like that. So yeah. That's the group of the four of us today, and we'll be talking through this topic with you. Couple other points. Please use the chat. I will do my best to keep an eye on it and kind of address and raise things as and when we can. We may also have a bit of time at the end to kind of address things and bring questions that we haven't managed to get through. So please do use the chat. And also the recording today as well, it will be on YouTube. So for those of you who may want to look back at the content that we talk about, or perhaps share it with a colleague or someone who hasn't managed to join us today, it will be on YouTube. We'll get a link out through the usual means. It'll be on LinkedIn and those sorts of areas. Final kind of introductory point. The reason the four of us have got together and not anyone else is that we are all part of the Experimentation Elite event, which is taking place in December this year. Either speakers or sponsors, and where we will all be at the event. So if you haven't got tickets and you would like to come, it's going to be a fantastic event. I think we're all looking forward to it quite a bit. So it'll be good to see you there. You can get tickets at experimentationelite.com if you haven't done so already. And with that, onto the webinar then. So the first topic we are looking at is single page versus multi-step forms, and why this may not necessarily be as straightforward an answer as you may think. Yeah. So I guess Alan, to jump in first.
Yeah, so in terms of multi-step versus single-step forms, just to give you an idea of the prevailing wisdom that's out there, the general advice is, and studies as well, to be fair, if you search them online and also pretty much most of the tests we've done ourselves at Zuko, show that if you break a form into multiple steps rather than having one big page, I don't know if you can see it on this, but it's a classic example of a single page with loads of fields on. The standard wisdom is that breaking into multiple steps rather than just having one page will improve your conversion rate. That said, I know out in the wild that there are examples where this, while it may in a large proportion of cases be true, and say from Zuko data we see that, it's not always true. And I think, Chris, in particular, you've kind of had one recently, haven't you, that where that is not the case?
Yeah, so what we did, we ABN tested a version. It was originally, and it wasn't any of these, but it was originally a long single page checkout, which and what we did, we split it up into accordion sections, which was equivalent to how the M&S one is in the middle here, where each chunk you do in an accordion and you kind of go down step by step. So you can still see what's coming, and you can see like a taster of what the next steps are, but you're only showing this kind of bite-sized chunk of options at the moment. And to everyone's surprise, it didn't work actually, and the long page worked on that occasion with that particular audience and with those particular type of products. So it's just again a warning. All of us here on the webinar today will tell you that you still need to test, and you'll always get surprises like that.
Yeah, I think we've probably all seen things both work and fail across the various customers that we've worked with, right?
Mm-hmm.
Totally, yeah. And just on the far left on here is John Lewis's one, which is the real bite-sized chunks. That's really one step at a time with a progress bar. So you almost got all the levels of extreme here with the single page. Actually, the single pages, even from basket, including the whole of a checkout, all spaced out.
Yeah, it's an interesting one to say, because the only time we really see multi-step forms fail is where you kind of oversplit, where we've seen it, the type form style, which can work quite well. You're asking one question on each page. However, if you've got 20 odd questions, it kind of, you can see a definite drop off, particularly if there's no progress bar there. So it was really interesting to see, to hear your discussion about, your experience where actually breaking it into bite-sized chunks didn't work. I don't know if Emma, you've had any experience in this particular hypothesis.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, definitely. So I've pulled together a couple of examples here, because I think the example, I guess, that you showed first, Alan, is like, e-commerce, presumably checkout flow, quite a lot of different fields. So, breaking that out into more manageable steps kind of, feels like it makes sense there. So, you talked about the current wisdom, the general wisdom on that. In terms of what we've seen in more of a B2B space, where naturally, I guess, typically the forms are shorter, maybe we're talking like 5, 7 or 8 kind of fields. So first of all, we tested a sort of a multi-step like wizard approach versus like a standard form with the kind of 7 or 8 fields, which you saw on the slide just before. And in that scenario, we saw that multi-step did outperform just the standard form in that sense. But then when we started digging a little bit further into kind of iterating on this test, we started actually adding steps to this wizard approach. So this time, I guess it's thinking about not just multi-step versus one page, but actually how many steps we have within that form. And actually, we found that adding certain questions to that form, to that wizard process, actually had a positive impact. So here we added a specific question about kind of their specific needs, what services people were interested in, and actually there we saw a positive impact. But then I think on the next slide, we iterated again with a different additional question, and we saw the opposite. We saw a negative impact. So I think this just kind of speaks to the fact that it's so important to test these things, and more fields or more steps isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's about that relevancy, I guess. So in this scenario, and I think we see this quite a lot in B2B, is in some cases, people almost want to provide more information because they want a more tailored follow-up.
Yeah.
We've got some kind of quotes from some user research that I was involved in a few slides time, and that kind of alludes to that sentiment that, you know, if I've only provided my name and my email address in a quote form, how are you actually going to follow up with a quote? You're not. You're actually just going to, you know, ring me probably incessantly and try and get more information from me. So it is that kind of balancing act, I think. Yeah. So that's some thoughts from me on that topic.
That was really interesting. On the one of the things we tested was on a loan application website, and again it was that sometimes asking more questions can actually work, which is really along the same point as because people can become more invested in it then, because they're having to almost tell you more about them, to your point, Emma, as well. It's a really interesting kind of psychological thing there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that kind of creeps into the next topic, which I'll try not to creep into too much, but you know, the number of fields and the whole quality versus quantity discussion as well, which is so important here. You know, we could reduce a 7-8 step process down to one email address field, but ultimately, from a business perspective, does that make sense? You get you know, a lot more people filling that in that have actually lower intent in the end. So I think, yeah, we're going to talk about that in a little while, but I think that's a really important thing to consider here as well.
Definitely. I think got an interesting one coming up, a mortgage form which is just on one page, which I've not seen before for mortgages. So currently just on one page. So and conditional questions, etc. So probably upwards of maybe even 100 questions. It is color coded, so it's broken down, but on a single page. So actually, it'll be interesting to see if there's a test and breaking that down in a multi-step. That because that's a classic example of, you know, or maybe they'll confound us and say, actually, the way we do it at the moment works. So actually, I'm really looking forward to that one.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds super interesting. I think the other thing, you know, just thinking a bit about what's on the slide here, is about kind of perception of effort, right? I think this whole thing about multi-step and single page, you mentioned a second ago, Chris, like it's an interesting kind of psychological phenomenon. And I think it's about kind of managing expectations in the right way and communicating the perception of effort in the right way. So this example here is about kind of, it's not just about how many steps we have or whether we show them all at once, but actually how we show them initially. So for example, you know, this is from a single page form, which looked really, really long. But actually, if you can close some fields by default, because actually it's an address lookup where users can just start typing their address and the options appear. Why show like 10 fields when you can just show one? And then that what was a very long looking one-page checkout now actually doesn't look so bad. So you can kind of start thinking about these types of things as well.
Yeah, address fields nowadays are quite interesting, aren't they? I think most websites don't really design for it, but autocompletes are everywhere. These kind of postcode-based lookups are everywhere as well, and yet you're still very used to seeing, you know, here's every single field, give you complete freedom to type whatever you want. Yeah, it's quite interesting.
Those auto-address things are one of the areas that go wrong so often. Have you found that they put everything in the wrong place on so many forms we come across, and that can prove difficult. That can prove just really annoying for people. But if it works, it's a real time saver.
And just an interesting one, because we earlier in the year added browser autofill tracking to Zuko, so we can now track which users have used autofill, and so hopefully we're going to publish some sort of aggregated conclusions onto whether it's significantly better or worse in completing in increasing conversion rates for forms if they use autofill versus not using autofill, and we'll see where, you know, how that pans out, because that's an interesting piece of research we'll be hopefully releasing later in the year.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think the whole address lookup conversation is another reason why user testing or usability studies is really important in checkout forms or forms in general as well, because I think you can fall into that trap as someone either working in-house or for a company in an agency capacity of kind of putting in a very standard address, you know, and QAing things with a very standard set of information. Same with autofill, like watching users interact with a form on their device where they have autofill set up, these types of things, we can really understand like what they would actually do. Whereas, you know, the way that I use a form when I'm checking it or QAing something for a client might be quite different. There's also, you know, examples where there's very edge case addresses. I live in a new build, so for about 6 months last year, it was very difficult to actually use, you know, the address lookups because we weren't like on the system yet. And there's all those kind of nuances in terms of kind of filling in addresses and these types of things that can really come out when you're doing, you know, research with real people versus kind of just walking through the website yourself, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just going to put this in because this is it comes down to the reality again of having of testing on real devices, but also of this is almost like a warning about the copying. There's been quite a lot of talk recently on LinkedIn about you know, what influence your competitors should have on you. You know, how much time should you spend looking at what they're doing? And actually, this was just a funny thing that happened to me a little while back, where the old phrase, let's copy what John Lewis is doing in their checkout on their forms, came up in a meeting. I'm sure you've been in many like that. And yeah, they do a lot of good stuff. But it was funny because it was a whole meeting of people in the same room, and two people had this exact phrase at the same time. And they said, let's copy what John Lewis is doing. And one of them said, they've got a multi-step checkout. Let's do that then. And then the other one, at almost the same time, said they've got an accordion style, all in one page, accordion style. And of course, what John Lewis were doing was A/B testing, and each of those people were getting a different variation. And it was hilarious. It was just one of those funny situations. And so you never know which of the variations are actually working or not. And also, you don't really know how successful their experimentation program is. There are still a lot of big brands out there releasing big changes, big features, and not A/B testing them, which may come to surprise you. But optimization and CRO is almost like it's still alive in a very kind of small centralized team in many of these places, and they haven't yet brought in experimentation to the whole of the team. So therefore, that's why kind of features are not tested so much. So it's just kind of a warning there. So I thought that was quite funny to put in. Back to one thing I remember on the multi-step thing, a really important area of the multi-step when you're breaking down forms again, is that a key thing is in the context of what type of form it is. I've seen in finance and insurance, and a bit similar to your mortgage example, actually, Alan, it's those situations where the user, and we've seen this in user research too, when they actually have to leave the room and go and find information to fill out the form. And of course, if it may sometimes look really cool to just do the kind of one question at a time type of method. But if you don't know what's coming up, you don't know, you're going to have a lot of journeys down the stairs to actually find, right, I need my driving license, I need my house, my insurance, my last insurance policy. Damn, what was the date of my policy last time? And it's actually can be really inconvenient, yet it can look really good and kind of, so I think it's that balance, isn't it? So maybe that long mortgage form serves a purpose.
It could well work. I mean, I think just to speak to your example, we've seen forms where people time out after like 5 minutes or so. So they go away, find it, come back, and they've timed out. You can just see the dropout rates on a particular field, whether it's, you know, find your expiry date or your passport number or whatever. Suddenly spike, and then you just change the timeout, and at least then it reduces the dropout rate, at least at that stage. Although it's, again, best, you know, ideally they would know ahead of time what's coming.
Yeah, and to that point, Alan, I think following on from your point, Chris, then there's a kind of consideration for how do we manage expectation around these forms. So maybe, you know, a fancy one question at a time approach would work if we primed users on the first step or in like the intro screen of like, you're going to need XYZ, go get it now. And then you can kind of go through all of those steps. And I think there's quite a lot of examples of that, even just with like a short kind of, you know, demo form or something like that in B2B of like, or contact form, like what's actually going to happen next when I fill this form in, what can I expect? Just, I think there's a whole piece that is kind of separate, I guess, from things like form, like field UX that we so typically think about, and also the layout of the form, but that kind of exterior context and content that can help kind of reassure, motivate, and ultimately improve the user experience, because you don't have to go up and down the stairs so many times. So yeah, I think there's something to think about there as well.
Yeah, and quite often the obvious things I think people want to track and look at in terms of performance and success will actually go down when you introduce these kind of, you know, before you even get started, go ahead and grab your whatevers and, you know, make sure you know about X, Y, and Z. You know, if quite often people look at, you know, next page, first click as like their KPI for things that they want to improve. And if you're telling people to go away and do a bit more work, quite often all those numbers will go down. But it is still quite useful in seeing that the end goal, which is kind of quality leads, good submissions, volume of submissions, those things will still increase because people aren't hitting the timeout page. They're not having to run away, get frustrated when they realize they forgot where their passport's kept, and all these kind of usual things that happen in life that when you're building a website, you don't really realize people are doing.
Yeah.
And I was just kind of thinking back to on the actual finance side, because finance is really interesting because it's kind of it's something quite serious as well, isn't it? You know, you put a lot of effort in. You're actually putting in some really kind of personal details in there, quite kind of really important stuff, rather than just buying an item. And one of the things we've seen recently is people getting very anxious about whether they're going to lose all the information or not. So that's another important factor when you're having several steps. It's that assurance that actually what you're putting in is being saved. So the best forms out there, some of the best examples are kind of like the comparison websites that do really good job on forms. They get the basics right, you know, they get all the error validation working really well now, and it's because their business is basically dependent on how good their forms are. So it's a good place to look, actually. But it's that they do a great job of saving things for you, and the best kind of finance companies do that as well, just saying it's already saved, don't worry about it, because there is this anxious business of it's like the fear of going back in forms as well, because people are used to those. Remember the old ones where we had to resubmit, you know, when you go back in the browser. And people still have that in their mind, that fear of, damn, I'm going to lose everything, all that hard work I put in.
Well, some forms still do that. We've seen recently. So it's not just the mists of time.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, kind of next area to look at is number of fields. And again, there's some interesting research, Alan, that you've dug up on whether or not this really matters, right?
Yes, I mean, it's kind of linked to what Emma was talking about before, but there was a HubSpot bit of research that was bandied around a few years ago, and there's also similar ones there, which you can see here basically seem to show that the lower number of fields you've got, the higher your conversion rate, and is almost become an axiom. You know, chop your field rates down and you'll increase. It's like, well, actually, of course, as with everything we have to test, is that the case? And so sort of looking at the next slide, we looked at our forms across the database. So obviously we've got a database of lots of forms, and this basically plots the number of potential inputs on the x-axis against a view conversion rate from form view to form conversion, to see if there was any correlation. And we put the kind of the line of best fit there, and as you can see, it's pretty flat. So you can see there are, you know, short forms with crappy conversion rates, long forms with really good conversion rates. So it suggests that there's more at play than just the number of fields. And so, you know, again, this is essentially what we'll talk about, you know, the things that are more important, specifically motivation. Just to give example from our benchmarking data, which we've published, the sector with the highest conversion rate for forms is local government. and they also have the longest forms. So obviously that's a classic example of, okay, big, long, complicated, and typically often, you know, not very user-friendly forms. But they still got a huge conversion rate. Why is that? Well, obviously it's kind of to do with the motivation and the you know, the user. Where else do they go? If you want to fill in a form for planning permission, you can't. There's no competition. It's a monopoly. So therefore, actually, you have to slog through this 80-question form to get to where you want to be. And that's obviously an extreme example, but the kind of principle holds for any form. You know, how motivated is your user to complete you? Can they go elsewhere? Which impacts on conversion rate. It's not an excuse for having a bad form, obviously, but it does impact.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point about intent in this discussion, because, you know, if you're purchasing something, to your point, Alan, you know, you probably can go elsewhere to do that. Whereas if I want a new wheelie bin delivered from my local government, I really don't have much other option. So it's an interesting one. And I think in terms of, you know, the graphs that you showed around form fields, like you mentioned, you know, I think there's so much more to it, intent being one thing. I also think it's, you know, related to what are those fields. You know, if you remove a field, and that slide there kind of shows some quotes from user research of people questioning, like, well, why do you need this and why do you need that? You know, these types of pieces of information. If you're removing fields that users deem, you know, unnecessary, or at least they don't understand why you need that information, then, you know, chances are less fields is going to be more positive. As we showed earlier, actually, in some cases, asking more questions can help, because people then feel that, you know, you care more about what their needs are, their requirements are. They're going to get more tailored follow-up. And I think to that point, you know, you see quite a lot of examples of form fields that have supporting content next to them to explain why, you know, you need that information. So I've seen an example in ecom, and it's, you know, asking for a phone number, and it just says, you know, don't worry, we will only contact you about your delivery. So then you're like, okay, so I'm going to get a text, so I know when my delivery is coming. Then you're more likely to kind of respond. And there's obviously other examples of that as well. But just, again, I guess it's about that reassurance and just explaining why you need those fields, if you really do. If you don't need them, then why are you collecting them? You know, is my next question.
Yeah, and the same goes for the email fields, doesn't it? Email contacting them is a really interesting thing we've seen as well. From you know, when people are kind of seem to be okay with leaving an email address, they kind of almost expect, oh, you're going to market to me, you know. But when it's something a bit like telephone number, that's a really key one at the moment. One of the biggest things actually we found recently is that people wanted to. They understand they want to speak to somebody, but they don't want to be contacted at a time that's inconvenient for them. So actually, a whole lot of work we've been working on is how do we put in things like actually time slots and things. So you're booking a time, and that kind of alleviates that fear of they're just going to phone me all the time. They're going to phone me when I'm in bed or something at 8 in the morning, versus I'm at work or whatever. So that's a real fear there that you need to address.
Yeah, it's a good point. One of those quotes on that slide actually referenced, you know, the whole remote working kind of situation. I think it's the very bottom quote. So he's saying, like, you know, I work remotely. I don't have a business phone anymore. I don't have a desk phone. So if I'm going to provide you my phone number, it's literally going to be my personal phone number. But this is a business-based inquiry. You know, so there was concern around that as well, which I think was interesting. It's kind of, you know, a sign of the times, I guess, that, you know, people aren't sat there at a desk with a particular phone number. They therefore don't want to provide maybe personal details when it comes to kind of business inquiries. So I thought that was an interesting one as well.
Oh yeah, all really good stuff. Phone numbers in particular, I hate giving out, so I'm completely with all of you there. Looking at terrible experiences with form fields and kind of almost more micro UX, I guess. Chris, this is an example you found for date of birth fields, right?
Yeah, this is actually that's my hand. And again, and I was filming this because I wanted to point out the importance of testing on real devices. There's a real lack of kind of QA on real devices, I find, in some of the big development companies, and those create and actually they don't discover these problems. And also, to be honest, there's a lack of kind of usability testing where these problems would come out really clearly as well. This is with me having to put a date of birth field in. This is with an insurance company which I signed up to, and they sent me a text message to complete my registration, which is kind of obviously suggesting it's best I need to complete it on a mobile phone. And then, yeah, I just got completely stuck on this. It just flies around and jumps from bottom to the top, and it took a long time. And I'm sure everybody watching is probably kind of just infuriated already, even watching it.
Yeah, it looks like one of those situations where it's probably been tested on Chrome DevTools as opposed to a real phone or something like that.
Yeah,
totally. We see that all the time. I mean, it's another point where for A/B tests as well, actually, just to make sure that you are QAing them, but you're also doing it on real devices, not just relying on the simulators or on the Chrome Web Dev tools, of course.
And Emma, we've got. Oh, sorry, go on now.
Oh, I was just going to say, in terms of we're taking that back to hypotheses, I think certainly a hypothesis for these date of birth fields is use 3 text boxes instead of drop downs, and that's desktop as well as mobile, because we've done we've tested that ourselves, and we've done eye tracking research and time research. It's certainly definitively faster to do that and smoother, and it's it's likely to have a positive impact on your conversion rate. But it's worth testing that if you've currently got like one of these monsters that you pointed out there, and Emma will take us through for this particular one.
Yeah, so it's a kind of, similar-ish example. I didn't have the the UX issues of jumping up and down, but just in terms of actually selecting my date of birth. Here, I posted about this on LinkedIn a few months ago, and actually, funnily enough, it helped us to get Decathlon as a client. Yeah, so it was essentially a case of having to click through every single month, and I gave up. I wasn't born in 2003. I was born a little bit before then, and I clearly just gave up at this point. And I think the other interesting thing about this one in particular is there's no guest checkout, so this is literally part of the checkout process. You have to create an account in order to check out. And in order to create an account, you have to provide your date of birth, and the process of doing so on mobile was a nightmare. I actually was purchasing a gift for my brother. I went elsewhere. I went to Wiggle instead and purchased elsewhere. So I think it's also about the context, right? This is in such an important part of the journey, and you're putting this huge barrier in my way. So yeah, just I guess to reiterate Chris's point about testing on real devices, and Alan's point about making this easier. Input fields would have saved me 10-15 minutes of frustration in this scenario. So yeah.
Oh, the other quick point on that previous screen grab on the video is that when people are designing in Figma, they often forget that there's going to be a keyboard coming up. So I've seen that too. I've seen the Figma, the final designs being coded, and no one's actually thought about the space that a keyboard on a phone actually comes up when you're filling out a form.
Yeah, and I know what devs are like. If you send them a design, they'll build their design and go, hey, this is exactly what you asked for.
I think the other classic one here, just to sort of touch on Alan's suggestion about the input fields as well, is on mobile, where you click into what is a numerical input field, and you get the text keypad. So then you have to manually switch to the numbers. It's just simple things like that can add unnecessary friction for users, especially on mobile. This slide is mine. I don't know if we've got time to go through it. It was kind of an interesting example, and also a bit of a shout out, I guess, to Zuko, because we did use some data from Zuko to help us here. So this is obviously a payment page, and I think it kind of talking a little bit about bad UX, but also a bit about like error messaging, kind of. So we saw that there was a really high abandonment rate on the payment page. and we wanted to investigate, why, other than people just kind of abandoning at this point, which you would expect to an extent. But Zuko tracking and analytics data helped us to understand what was going on, which was that people were misinterpreting gift voucher field for promo code. So what we were seeing is like about 10% of users putting in a promo code into that field, but it's not a promo code. It's for paying with a gift voucher. Less than 1% of people actually pay with a gift voucher. So this made us sort of think about, a range of different next steps. So for example, they're missing the promo code, which is actually in the basket. Why are they missing it? Is there a way to make that more prominent earlier in the journey to help prevent, this issue later on? But also, if less than 1% of people are paying by gift voucher, why is that option so prominent on the payment page? And also, is it something to do with the labeling? Gift voucher. Do people understand what that means? In particular, perhaps people aren't even reading it. So there's a series of kind of different optimization tests that we want to run around here. But I think just a call out really of kind of understanding behavior. The other thing that helped quite a lot here was using like session recordings from like Hotjar to help us kind of see that behavior happening and see what they were then doing when they received an error message and whether they were able to find their way back to the basket, etc. So just kind of an interesting use case, I think.
Yeah, that's a class. I mean, the classic A/B test is people making the promo less prominent. That's almost like the sticky header test, isn't it? These days, it's such a problem. As soon as you put that too prominently, everybody goes off trying to look for a voucher code, and they spend, and it might very well end up on your competitor's site. But you still need that functionality. So, like you say, how do you do it nice and clearly for those who genuinely have a voucher code, without encouraging everyone else just to go off on this search for one.
Yeah, just as a shout out, with one I always like. It's called Zatu Games in the UK. It's a board gaming site, and they've got it. They've got voucher, so promotional code and discount code. But it's kind of grayed out at the top, so it's available if you want to find it, but it's not like in the flow of the checkout. So you're not coming across it and going, right, I need a promo code. So, and I don't know any results, to be fair. It's just something I've seen that I would like to test. But
yeah, we just A/B tested making it less prominent on the payment page, and it worked for conversion rate actually. So it did actually work, but you had to do it in we did it in a collapsible thing, which is like the standard approach, isn't it? Really, to make it a bit less prominent.
Yeah, I think so. For that client that I showed that example from, we have also done those tests of reducing the I think it was almost like a case of we reduced the prominence of the promo code and then caused ourselves a problem later in the journey. So I think it's just one of those examples of being careful how we're measuring things and iterating, and nothing's ever completely fixed, unfortunately. Nothing's ever completely optimized. So
yeah, I'm trying to think that there's a few companies now who are actually showing the available promo code on the same page, which is a really interesting idea when you start to, because then it's like stepping back two steps and thinking, how can we really solve this customer problem?
Yeah, it's like a dominoes
business
approach,
problem,
I think, isn't it? Where
it's
kind of find my deal, get me my promo code, and Domino's will just bring them up for you.
Yeah, it's really interesting way of doing it to avoid users going off and hunting for one.
Yeah.
Cool. One topic. I think we've only got a few minutes, give or take. But just to hop through this idea of kind of qualifying or priming people before they hop into something quite difficult. And I think we've been through some of the conversation already, but we just got kind of a few practical examples. This is a customer of ours, unbiased, and what we found is asking people quite difficult questions. So, what kind of assets do you own? How much are they worth? All these kinds of things. If you're looking for a more financial advisor, it's maybe not something many people are prepared to part with, but it's this idea of qualifying leads beforehand. Just a practical example, of what you can show people, and valuable information to get before just letting anyone submit an inquiry when there's a real person kind of servicing it on the other end. A couple more examples. So we had this is Halifax, which I found as this is idea of, you know, long journey, home insurance. I hate that form. It's, I think, 9 steps, 8 steps last time I checked. There's this idea of, you know, before you get going, you know, this is what you need from us. This is roughly how long it will take. This is what you need. Go and get yourself ready, and then you should be able to power through. And again, this idea of motivation as well. You know, if you're getting a loan, this is money supermarket, I think. So, you know, why are you doing it? And if you have in mind, you know, oh, I'm doing this to get my car or pay for the wedding or something, even if the first few minutes are a bit awkward or a bit challenging, you're kind of forgiven when your mind's in wedding mode, I think. A few more examples here as well.
Yeah, I added these. So I guess the point here is that these are quite kind of, I guess, what we'd call no-brainers, but we obviously don't use the word no-brainers. You always have to test. But some kind of examples of just like reassurance and motivation, like throughout forms and checkout processes. So e-com, you hear things, you know, security and shipping, and then things like benefits. And we talked about before, like communicating the next steps. And there was some good examples of that there. I really like the idea of explaining, you know, how long is this process going to take? But also in this example in the bottom right, you know, what's actually going to happen next? What can I expect from this demo that I'm signing up for? These types of things. But as I've mentioned on this slide, you always need to test. And I do have an example of where this kind of backfired in a test that I was involved in. So we included like some shipping information ultimately within the checkout to kind of say, you know, you've qualified for free delivery. But we actually saw a negative impact from that test. So when we dug into the data, we could see that rather than completing the checkout, more users in the variation were actually clicking, like going to the footer and clicking on help. So we came up with like a hypothesis for an iteration that sort of surfacing that information about shipping actually caused them to have more questions about shipping, and perhaps we weren't providing actually enough information. So for example, how long is it going to take? We just said you've qualified for free shipping, but we hadn't explained how long that was going to take, for example. So we iterated and kind of, you know, again, it's a balancing act of how much information you want to provide. But we iterated and provided a little bit more information and did see that positive trend. So we also see this with the security example that feels like a no-brainer, but I have seen examples where you've added that into a checkout and seen a negative impact, whether it's people kind of, you know, saying, well, should I be worried about security? It kind of puts ideas into people's heads sometimes, some of this stuff. So yeah, I think it's just a reiteration of the point that obviously all these things should be tested.
Yeah, and just to give an example on one of your points there, the social proof, you can see the trust badges on there, and there's 3 on there. Now, we've seen examples where it's kind of, methinks the lady doth protest too much. It's kind of like the NASCAR effect. Someone's jammed 6 or 7 logos on there, and it's like, whoa, hang on a sec. Well, you know, and it's actually decreased conversion. So you've got to test that out as well.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. It's similar to the whole, like, you know, those reviews look a bit too good, so I don't believe them kind of thing. And also something we see a lot in like B2B and SaaS is like these logo strips, which theoretically show, you know, our tool has been used by Apple and Microsoft and but without any context, like those types of reassurance elements can actually have a negative impact, because it's like, you know, maybe I'm a small business and the fact that Microsoft use your tool actually is off-putting to me, because it makes me think that you're, you know, not relevant for me. So you do have to be careful about the types of reassurances and motivational elements that you use. And again, sorry.
No, go for it, Emma. Sorry.
I was just going to say another shout out for the, you know, the reason for doing user research, like these pieces of reassurance that you add in these important places on your forms should always be informed by, you know, fears, uncertainties, and doubts that you've identified as part of user research.
And I'm just going to add, yeah, I completely agree with that. That's all his points. I'm just going to add, the other thing is, one thing we see a lot of is people going back and forth, and actually you can see that in your analytics, or if you have more of a UX analytics tool, you can see that kind of pogo sticking between steps. That's very often an indicator that people are wanting to see something from previous step. often they want the one I still see missing is people don't have a summary of what, if it's e-commerce, don't have a summary of what they're buying, of all the details at that last step. And the last thing you want is people going back and forth, because again, remember, they're a bit worried that they're going to lose everything as well, so they're already anxious. So yeah, that can be a clue as to what's going on there, and a good hypothesis to test is what information do you carry throughout the whole form all the way through.
Absolutely. Thank you all for kind of going through this in depth. I know it's been a bit of a whirlwind. It's such a broad topic. I'm sure each of us could probably spend a good few hours kind of expressing our thoughts. But if I were to get maybe one, tip or direction from each of you that we think, if people were to start exploring somewhere, or, something in that vein, what should they be looking at? Chris, Alan, Emma, anyone with a, what would be the first place you'd look, the first thing you'd think about?
I mean, I'm sure Emma's going to say this too, but just the importance of actually, of doing usability testing on your forms. I mean, we've had such a busy last month, actually, so much user research, and we just get surprises all the time, and and also the power of those videos for the teams. It really helps experimentation teams to have that kind of that extra evidence from customers to really empower and improve their hypotheses, and ultimately it just increases your win rate, if that's one of your key program metrics. So important.
Yeah, I think probably all of us very, very strong advocates of doing the research, getting the data, and not jumping into things, I guess, without knowing what direction to look in.
And I suppose the other thing is speak to the people who work at the call center. Again, there are so many valuable insights there, which are kind of related to forms, because at that form point is where people are more likely to, if they have trouble, they're so invested by that point, they will call them often. And those guys are, well, they're so close to your customers. So just talk to them, try and get a summary get regular summaries every month from all their feedback. And you'll probably be able to find a lot of kind of objections and issues customers are having. And then you can either address any of the issues, or you can put some of the motivational content to put counter objections, little bits of content which are just a bit of reassurance across the whole of the journey of the form that's my tip.
I guess my tip, as well as obviously using data to see where your issues are, is segmenting that data. So getting, obviously the obvious one is desktop versus mobile users, but sometimes you can look at segmenting the data. People who get to the submit button, click the submit button, but don't successfully complete the form. That's a very valuable segment of users. And actually, do you want to segment those and see what they're doing, what error messages are triggering, where do they jump back to try and fix in the form, but they can't fix? That also gives you very valuable information as to where those users are struggling and ultimately dropping out.
Sure. Chris really did take the words out of my mouth in terms of my tip, in terms of the importance of seeing real users interact with your forms. I've run many usability studies in person as well, obviously pre-COVID, where you would walk back into the room where the client would be watching, and they would just be like gobsmacked after watching real people having these issues. And I think just to add to that, the importance of mobile, we highlighted that today, obviously, in, like, for example, Chris's video that he shared, and using real devices, but that goes for usability studies as well, especially kind of face-to-face, one-to-one usability studies can be slightly more tricky on mobile, in terms of, like, you need to think about how you're going to run those sessions. Like, you're going to have a handheld camera, you're going to have eye tracking glasses, like how you're going to run that in particular. But that's not a reason to not run those types of sessions on mobile, because it's super, super important.
Awesome. And yeah, just one from me. I think it's just stressing the point we made earlier, which is that, winners and successes are always shared, but there is no real notion of best practice and no-brainers. Experimentation is very much embedded into certainly everything the four of us do. But all the leading brands in the world really, and the most successful people are the ones who try and fail and learn and iterate and kind of go through that process. And it's a continuous journey of just repeatedly thinking, testing, learning, and trying to make things better. So don't just rush into doing what John Lewis do, as the example suggests. But yeah, that's everything from us. Thank you all for listening to us for the last hour or so. As I mentioned earlier, we will be at the Experimentation Elite event in December. So once again, if you are there, well, if you'd like to be there, certainly hop over to their site and grab some tickets. And yeah, we hope to see you there and on any future content that we put out as well. But thank you all. Have a good rest of the day. Thank you to Chris, Alan, and Emma as well. Really, really great conversation. And hopefully everyone's learned an incredible amount and ready to go and do some real research and get forms looking a lot better, especially those date of birth fields. That's what we want to see get better. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Okay.
Hey, thanks. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.